Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like you were waiting on a breakthrough, but the answer seemed to be taking forever? Perhaps you've prayed, believed, and done everything you know to do, yet nothing seems to be changing. Today, I want to encourage you that just because it feels late doesn't mean God is not working. Timing is one of the most challenging aspects of faith. It's easy to trust when everything is happening according to our plans, but what about when the answer seems delayed? When we feel like we've been waiting forever, it's tempting to think that something is wrong or that we've been forgotten. But the truth is, God's timing is never off. It may not match our calendar or fit within our deadlines, but it is always perfect. What we often overlook is that God's perspective is far beyond what we can comprehend. He sees the entire picture while we only see a small part of it. We're focused on what's right in front of us, the immediate need, the pressing issue. But God sees not just the moment, but also the ripple effects of every decision, every move, and every opportunity. His timing is not just about meeting your needs, it's about orchestrating a perfect plan that benefits you and others in ways you may not realize. Think about the story of Lazarus in the Bible. Jesus received word that Lazarus was gravely ill, but instead of rushing to his side, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. From a human perspective, it seemed like Jesus was too late. By the time he arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. But Jesus wasn't late, he was perfectly on time. His delay allowed for a greater miracle, one that revealed his power and brought glory to God in a way that healing Lazarus earlier would not have. That story reminds us that when it feels like God is too late, it's often because he is setting the stage for something far greater than we can imagine. Our impatience can sometimes make us question God's plans. We live in a fast-paced world where everything is instant. When we want something, we expect it now or at least soon, but God doesn't operate on our timeline. His delays are not denials, they are strategic pauses. These pauses can be for our growth, for the alignment of circumstances, or for the preparation of something bigger. During these times, we must resist the urge to give up or to take matters into our own hands. Instead, we should trust that God is working even if we can't see it. It's important to remember that waiting doesn't mean inactivity. While we wait, God is often preparing us for what's to come. Sometimes the delay is about getting us ready to handle the blessing. A gift given too soon can become a burden. God may be using the time to develop our character, strengthen our faith, or teach us lessons we need for the next season of our lives. The waiting period is not wasted time, it's a time of refinement. We also need to understand that God's delays can be for protection. There are moments when we're so eager for something that we don't realize it's not the right time or the right thing. God sees what we can't. He knows what's ahead. And his timing ensures that we step into his plans at the exact moment they are meant to unfold. What feels like a delay may actually be God shielding us from a mistake, a disappointment, or a setback. Faith is not just about believing for the outcome, it's about trusting the process. It's about saying, God, I understand why this is taking so long, but I trust you. That kind of trust pleases God and positions us to receive his best. It's not easy, especially when it feels like everyone else is moving forward. But it's in these moments that we grow deeper in our relationship with him. When we understand that God's timing is perfect, it takes the pressure off us. We don't have to strive, manipulate, or try to force things to happen. We can rest in the assurance that he's got it all under control. It's not about being passive or indifferent, it's about surrendering our timetable to his. That kind of surrender requires faith, but it also brings peace. So if you're waiting for a promise, a breakthrough, or an answer to prayer, know that God has not forgotten you. Trust that his timing is not just good, it's perfect. It may not look the way you expect or come when you think it should, but when it does, it will be worth the wait. Delays are something we all face, and they can be incredibly frustrating. When we have a vision, a dream, or a promise we're holding on to, it's natural to see it come to pass as quickly as possible. But one of the most important lessons we can learn in our faith journey is that delays are not denials. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. Often the delay is not because God is withholding something from us, but because he is preparing something for us or preparing us for it. Preparation is a crucial part of fulfilling any promise. If a builder tries to construct a house without first laying a solid foundation, the entire structure will be unstable. The same is true in our lives. The delays we experience are often the time God uses to build the foundation for what he's bringing into our lives. It may feel like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, God is at work. He's aligning people, circumstances, and opportunities to fit his perfect plan. Think about a seed planted in the ground. For weeks, there may be no visible signs of growth, but that doesn't mean the seed is inactive. Underneath the soil, roots are forming, and the seed is taking the necessary steps to sprout. The delay in seeing the sprout is not a sign that the seed isn't growing. It's evidence that the process is unfolding. When the time is right, the growth becomes visible and the plant begins to flourish. In the same way, our delays are often periods of unseen growth and preparation. Sometimes delays are about timing. There are moments when the opportunity we're praying for isn't ready, and rushing into it would result in something less than God's best. For example, imagine a young child asking for the keys to a car. It's not that the parent doesn't want to give good things to the child, it's that the child isn't ready for that responsibility yet. In the same way, God knows when the timing is right. He loves us too much to release something into our lives before we're prepared to handle it. Other times, delays are about alignment. God has a way of bringing the right people, the right opportunities, and the right circumstances together in ways that we could never orchestrate on our own. If we rush ahead, we may miss the full picture. Waiting allows God to position everything perfectly so that when the promise is fulfilled, it fits seamlessly into His greater plan. Delays can also be a time of testing. It's easy to trust God when everything is going smoothly, but what about when things aren't happening on our schedule? Delays test our faith, our patience, and our willingness to trust God even when we don't understand. They reveal whether we're truly dependent on Him or just on the outcomes we desire. This testing isn't to discourage us, but to strengthen us. It's during these times that we develop perseverance and grow deeper in our relationship with God. It's important to guard our hearts and minds during seasons of delay. The enemy loves to use as an opportunity to plant seeds of doubt, discouragement, and disbelief. He whispers thoughts like, it's never going to happen, or you must have missed God's plan. But those are lies meant to distract us from the truth that God's promises are always yes and amen. We must stand firm in faith, reminding ourselves of God's character and His faithfulness. The story of Joseph in the Bible is a powerful example of how delays are not denials. As a young man, Joseph had a dream that he would one day be in a position of great influence. But instead of stepping straight into that role, he faced years of delays and hardships. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. From the outside, it looked like his dream would never come to pass. But God was working behind the scenes the entire time, using those delays to prepare Joseph for the position of leadership he would eventually hold. When the time came, Joseph was not only ready, but also perfectly positioned to fulfill the dream God had placed in his heart. Another perspective to consider is that delays often protect us. There are times when we're so focused on what we want that we don't see the potential pitfalls or challenges ahead. God, in His infinite wisdom, knows what's best for us. A delay might be His way of keeping us from stepping into something prematurely or from entering a situation that could harm us. Delays require patience, and patience is a fruit of the Spirit. It's something we develop over time as we learn to trust God more deeply. Waiting is not passive. It's an active choice to trust that God is working even when we can't see it. It's a time to remain steadfast, to continue doing what we know is right, and to prepare ourselves for the fulfillment of the promise. What feels like a setback is often a setup for something greater. Life has a way of presenting us with challenges, detours, and disappointments that seem to throw us off course. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged and wonder if we'll ever get to where we're supposed to be. But the truth is, what we perceive as a setback is often God orchestrating events to position us for something far beyond what we could imagine. Sometimes the path to our destiny isn't a straight line. It's filled with twists and turns that we didn't anticipate. Those detours may seem like obstacles, but they are often the very things God uses to refine us, teach us, and prepare us for the next level. If everything always went according to our plan, we might miss out on the growth and strength that come from navigating the unexpected. It's in the detours that we learn resilience, patience, and a deeper trust in God's plan. Consider the story of David. He was anointed as the future king of Israel while still a young shepherd. You might think that after such a significant moment, David would immediately step into his royal position. But instead, he faced years of challenges and setbacks. He was pursued by King Saul, lived in caves, and endured seasons of uncertainty. From the outside, it looked like David's life was heading in the opposite direction of his destiny. Yet during those years, God was not only protecting David, but also shaping him into the leader he needed to be. By the time David became king, he had the character, wisdom, and strength required to rule well. What looked like a setback was in reality God setting him up for success. It's important to understand that God doesn't waste anything. Every difficulty, disappointment, and detour we face has a purpose. The very things that seem to delay us are often the tools God uses to prepare us. The relationships that didn't work out, the opportunities that fell through, or the plans that didn't materialize may all be part of a greater design that we can't see yet. While we may focus on what we've lost, God is focused on what He's building. He uses every setback as part of His divine strategy to move us closer to our destiny. Sometimes setbacks are God's way of getting our attention. When everything is going smoothly, we can become comfortable and complacent. But a setback can cause us to reevaluate, realign, and refocus. It can push us to seek God more earnestly and to rely on Him more fully. In those moments, we often discover a depth of faith and a level of dependence on God that we didn't know we had. The setback, as painful as it may be, can become a turning point that propels us into a new season of growth and opportunity. It's also worth noting that setbacks often involve timing. We might feel ready for something, but God sees what we can't. He knows when the conditions are right and when we're ready to handle what's ahead. A setback may simply be God's way of ensuring that we don't step into something prematurely. It's not a denial, it's a delay with purpose. And when the time is right, we often find that what we thought was a setback was actually a strategic pause that allowed everything to come together perfectly. In the midst of a setback, it's easy to feel forgotten or overlooked. But we must remember that God is always at work, even when we can't see it. He's orchestrating events, aligning circumstances, and preparing us for what's next. The setback is not the end of the story. It's just one chapter. And often it's the chapter that sets the stage for the greatest breakthroughs and blessings. Think about Joseph. He had a dream that he would one day be in a position of influence and leadership. But before that dream came to pass, Joseph experienced a series of devastating setbacks. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. From a human perspective, it looked like Joseph's life was going from bad to worse. But God was using each of those setbacks as part of His greater plan. Each step, no matter how difficult, was positioning Joseph to fulfill his destiny. When he finally became the second most powerful man in Egypt, it was clear that every setback had been a setup for something far greater. When we face setbacks, it's natural to feel disappointed or discouraged. But instead of letting those feelings take root, we can choose to shift our perspective. We can remind ourselves that God's ways are higher than our ways and that He often uses what looks like a setback to set us up for something extraordinary. The key is to keep our faith, stay the course, and trust that God is in control. Every great story includes moments of challenge and adversity. It's in those moments that characters grow, develop, and discover their strength. Your story is no different. The setbacks you face are not the end. They are the beginning of something greater. They are the moments when God is working behind the scenes, setting the stage for a future that exceeds your expectations. Faith means trusting God, even in the silence. Life is full of moments where we pray, seek, and wait, only to feel as if the heavens are quiet. It can be unsettling, even discouraging, to pour our hearts out to God and feel like we aren't getting a response. But silence does not mean absence. Just because you can't hear God doesn't mean He isn't speaking, working, or moving on your behalf. One of the greatest tests of faith is what you do when you don't see any evidence that things are changing. It's easy to trust when the path is clear, the doors are opening, and the answers are coming. But faith is truly tested in the silence. It's in those quiet moments when doubt tries to creep in that we must hold firm to what we know about God. He is faithful, He is good, and He has a plan, even when we can't see it. The Bible is filled with stories of people who had to trust God during silent seasons. Think about Abraham. God promised him that he would be the father of many nations, yet years went by without a single child. From a human perspective, it looked like the promise was delayed or even forgotten. But Abraham chose to believe in God's faithfulness even when there was no visible sign of progress. His faith wasn't dependent on what he could see or hear. It was rooted in his confidence that God always keeps His promises. Silence often feels like a void, but it's not empty. It's a space where God is working in ways that we can't comprehend. Just because we don't see immediate results doesn't mean nothing is happening. Think of a farmer who plants seeds in the soil. For weeks, there is no visible evidence of growth, but beneath the surface, roots are forming, and life is taking shape. The silence of the ground doesn't mean the seed is inactive. It's an essential part of the process. In the same way, God's silence is often a space where He is aligning circumstances, preparing hearts, and laying the foundation for what's to come. It's important to understand that silence doesn't mean God is distant. His silence is not a sign of disinterest or neglect. In fact, it's often a sign of His trust in you. God knows that silence can stretch your faith and deepen your dependence on Him. It's a way of teaching you to rely not on feelings or immediate outcomes, but on His unchanging character and promises. When you trust God in the silence, you demonstrate a faith that goes beyond circumstances, a faith that says, God, I trust You even when I don't understand. Silence is also an opportunity for growth. It's in those moments that we learn patience, endurance, and reliance on God. It's easy to grow impatient when we don't get immediate answers, but patience is a fruit of the Spirit that God often cultivates in us during silent seasons. As we wait, we develop a resilience and strength that prepares us for the blessings and challenges ahead. The waiting period is not wasted time. It's a time of preparation and growth. Sometimes the silence is God's way of inviting us to go deeper in our relationship with Him. When everything is going well and answers come easily, it's possible to become complacent. But silence can drive us to seek God more earnestly, to press into Him with a hunger and desire that we might not otherwise have. It's in the silence that we learn to pray more fervently, to search His Word more diligently, and to listen more intently. God uses these moments to draw us closer to Him, reminding us that our relationship with Him is not based on what He does for us, but on who He is. The silence can also serve as a reminder that God's ways are higher than our ways. We often want immediate answers and clear direction, but God operates on a different timetable. His plans are eternal, and His perspective is infinite. What may feel like a delay or an unanswered prayer is often God protecting us, teaching us, or working something greater than we can see. Trusting Him in the silence means acknowledging that His wisdom is far beyond ours and that He is working all things together for our good. Silence requires us to let go of control. We live in a world where we're accustomed to instant gratification and quick solutions. But faith asks us to surrender our timelines, our plans, and our need for immediate results. It asks us to trust that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with ours. This kind of trust isn't easy, but it's the foundation of a deep and unshakable faith. When you're in a season of silence, it's important to remember that God's promises are always true, even when you can't feel them. The silence doesn't negate His faithfulness. It's a reminder to anchor yourself in His Word, to hold on to the promises He has given you, and to trust that He is working behind the scenes in ways you can't yet see. Faith means standing firm in the silence, confident that God is with you and that His plan for your life is unfolding exactly as it should. God works behind the scenes to bring about His best. Life often feels like a series of disconnected events, some good, some challenging, and some that leave us wondering what's really going on. In the moment, it's hard to see how all the pieces fit together, but the truth is God is always at work, orchestrating events in ways we can't comprehend. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is moving behind the scenes, preparing circumstances, aligning opportunities, and setting the stage for His plans to unfold. One of the remarkable things about God is His ability to take what seems ordinary and weave it into something extraordinary. A chance encounter, an unexpected delay, or even a door that closes can all be part of a bigger picture that we don't yet see. While we're focused on the here and now, God is already in the future, working everything together for good. It's not always obvious, but it's always true. Think about the story of Esther in the Bible. At first glance, her journey seemed filled with random events. She was an orphan raised by her cousin living in exile. Through a series of unexpected circumstances, she was chosen to be queen. From the outside, it might have looked like a coincidence or even luck, but God was working behind the scenes all along. When a crisis arose that threatened her people, Esther was in the perfect position to act. Her rise to prominence wasn't accidental. It was part of God's plan to save an entire nation. This reminds us that what feels random or insignificant in our lives may be part of a greater purpose. The job you didn't get, the relationship that didn't work out, or the detour you had to take might all be pieces of a puzzle that God is putting together. We don't always understand it in the moment, but as time goes on, we often see how those seemingly disconnected events were part of God's plan. God's work behind the scenes is often subtle. He doesn't always announce what He's doing or give us a detailed roadmap. Instead, He asks us to trust Him, even when we can't see the whole picture. This can be challenging because we naturally want clarity and control. But faith means believing that God is working even when we can't see it. It's trusting that He is directing our steps and that His plans are better than anything we could create on our own. Sometimes God's behind the scenes work involves preparing us for what's ahead. There are seasons where it feels like we're waiting, but that waiting is often a time of preparation. God is shaping our character, refining our skills, and teaching us lessons that we'll need for the future. We may not realize it at the time, but those seasons of preparation are essential for stepping into the fullness of what God has planned. God also works behind the scenes through people. He places the right individuals in our paths at just the right time, often in ways we didn't expect. A mentor, a friend, or even a stranger can play a key role in moving us closer to our destiny. These connections may seem coincidental, but they are often divinely orchestrated. God uses relationships to open doors, provide guidance, and offer support when we need it most. It's also important to remember that God's work is not limited by our understanding or timelines. We often want immediate results, but God operates on His own schedule. While we're focused on the short term, He's working on the long term. His timing is perfect, even when it feels delayed. Trusting Him means letting go of our need to control the process and believing that He is at work, even in the delays. Sometimes God's behind the scenes work involves protecting us from things we don't see. A closed door, a missed opportunity, or an unexpected change can feel disappointing in the moment. But looking back, we often realize that those moments were actually God's way of steering us away from something that wasn't His best for us. His protection is part of His provision, and what feels like a setback is often a redirection towards something greater. When we look at our lives through the lens of faith, we begin to see evidence of God's work everywhere. The challenges that stretched us, the blessings that surprised us, and the moments of quiet assurance all point to a God who is deeply involved in every detail. He is not distant or detached. He is intimately aware of our needs, desires, and struggles. And He is constantly working behind the scenes to bring about His best for us. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is orchestrating events in ways we can't see. He is aligning opportunities, preparing breakthroughs, and setting the stage for what's next. Trusting Him means believing that He is in control, even when life feels uncertain. It's holding on to the promise that He works all things together for good, and knowing that His plans are always for our benefit. God's behind the scenes work is a reminder that we are never alone and nothing in our lives is ever wasted. Your waiting season is not wasted. It's a time of preparation and purpose. In life, there are moments when we feel like we're in a holding pattern, waiting for a promise to be fulfilled, a door to open, or a breakthrough to come. These seasons can be frustrating, especially when it feels like nothing is changing. But what we often don't realize is that the waiting season is one of the most critical times in our journey. It's not a time of inactivity, but a season where God is at work preparing us for what's ahead. When you plant a seed in the ground, there's a period where you see no visible growth. Day after day, the soil looks the same, and it might seem like nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, the seed is germinating, sending out roots, and preparing to sprout. The waiting period is not wasted. It's essential for the seed to grow strong and healthy. Similarly, your waiting season is a time when God is working behind the scenes, preparing you and your circumstances for the blessings to come. Waiting teaches us patience and trust. In a world that thrives on instant gratification, waiting can feel like an inconvenience. But patience is a fruit of the Spirit, something God wants to develop in us in the waiting that we learn to trust God's timing and surrender our own. We come to understand that His ways are higher than ours and that His plans are far greater than anything we could imagine. Waiting refines our faith, teaching us to lean on God rather than our own understanding. This season is also a time for growth. God often uses waiting to develop our character, strengthen our faith, and equip us for the next phase of our journey. The lessons we learn during this time are ones that will carry with us into the future. They prepare us to handle the blessings and responsibilities that come with answered prayers. If God were to give us everything we ask for immediately, we might not be ready to handle it. Waiting ensures that we're prepared, not just for the blessing itself, but for the challenges that come with it. In the Bible, we see many examples of waiting seasons that were anything but wasted. Take Joseph, for example. He had a dream that he would one day be a leader, but before that dream was realized, he spent years in slavery and imprisonment. From the outside, it looked like his life was on hold, but God was using that time to prepare Joseph for his destiny. Through those years, Joseph developed the wisdom, humility, and resilience he would need to lead a nation. His waiting season was not a time of activity, but a season of preparation. Waiting also positions us for God's best. Sometimes we're so focused on what we want that we don't realize God has something far greater in store. A delay doesn't mean denial. It often means God is setting the stage for something better than we could imagine. During the waiting season, God aligns circumstances, prepares opportunities, and works in ways we can't see. He's not just preparing us for the blessing. He's preparing the blessing for us. It's important to remain active and intentional during the waiting season. This is not a time to sit back and do nothing. It's a time to prepare, grow, and trust. Continue to pray, serve, and pursue what God has placed in your heart. Waiting is not passive. It's an active posture of faith. It's choosing to trust God's plan even when you don't see immediate results. It's continuing to sow seeds of faith, knowing that the harvest will come in due time. The waiting season is also a time to deepen your relationship with God. When we're focused on waiting for something to happen, it's easy to make the blessing our primary focus. But God wants to use this time to draw us closer to Him. He wants us to seek Him, not just for what He can do for us, but for who He is. The intimacy we develop with God during the waiting season is something that will sustain us long after the blessing arrives. It's natural to feel discouraged during the waiting season, especially when it feels like progress is slow or non-existent. But God's silence is not absence and His delays are not denials. He is always at work, even when we can't see it. The waiting season is not a time of inactivity. It's a time of preparation, growth, and alignment. It's a season where God is working in you and for you, setting the stage for the fulfillment of His promises. While you wait, it's important to focus on what God is teaching you and how He's shaping you. The waiting season is an opportunity to refine your character, strengthen your faith, and grow in wisdom. It's a time to trust that God's timing is perfect and that He is working all things together for your good. Your waiting is not in vain as part of a greater plan that God is unfolding in His perfect time. In life, we all face moments when it feels like God is silent, delays are endless, and progress seems distant. But remember, His timing is perfect, His plans are greater, and His ways are higher. What may seem like setbacks, silence, or waiting are often steps for something extraordinary. Trust in His faithfulness, stay anchored in His promises, and embrace the journey, knowing that God is always at work, even when it's not visible. Keep your faith alive, for in due season His purpose will unfold, and it will far exceed anything you could have imagined.